Hello again. In this video, we're going to talk about the Philidor Endgame, which comes up after the moves e4, d6, d4, knight f6, knight c3, e5. And here white takes on e5, d takes e5, d takes e5, forced, queen d8, and king takes d8. So we reach the Philidor Endgame. We can see that we lost the right to castle. So our king will be stuck in the center, which is not a bad thing because it's an endgame. But also white will probably manage to get an extra tempo by castling long, and then it comes with check. And white wants to put up some strategical pressure on us. Basically, I think there are two possibilities. Either white is playing for a draw, that's why they play this endgame, or they try to squeeze some small edge. Anyway, I think black is doing fine, and black can even try to play for a win in this endgame on a longer term. And we're counting on this knight on c3 that could get restricted after a move like c6. Then the knight is a bit misplaced on c3. So here we covered four possibilities: knight f3, bishop g5, f4, and of course the most tempting move, bishop to c4, immediately hitting on f7. Knight f3, white is attacking on e5, and also, of course, normal development. And also it can be like a small trap, because if we're not careful, white could suddenly um, attack us on f7 as well, like after going bishop c4 and knight g5. And we need to make sure that we'll be able to defend that pawn on f7. That's why we go bishop d6, an important move. And now we can defend f7 twice with king e7 and rook f8. So white's plan of going bishop c4 and knight g5 leads nowhere. Now white goes bishop e3. So bishop e3 or bishop g5. Obviously, if white goes bishop c4, it can transpose, but maybe we can just go king e7, and the king is better placed on e7. Or if we just want to transpose, we go king e8. So it doesn't make much sense for white to go bishop c4 here. Bishop g5. This move is tempting, is also an active move, and white wants to either destroy our pawn structure or go long castle and bring the rook into play on the d file. On the other hand, after this move, white doesn't have ideas of knight g5 anymore. So that's an important point. And here we go bishop e6. What happens is that whenever we can get this bishop to e6, it's very good for black, because now we don't allow bishop c4 anymore, and also white doesn't have this knight on g5 to attack the bishop. So white castles long. Obviously, the threat is knight takes e5 to grab a pawn, and we just defend by playing knight e7. We just finished the development. We still need to see what we do about our king, where it goes e7, e8, c8. And here there is knight b5 or bishop b5. Obviously, in this position, after making natural moves, white is a bit stuck. So he has to do something. The obvious bishop c4 is not there. So bishop b5, trying this kind of symmetrical activity, bishop on g5, bishop on b5. But I think this backfires because there are no threats, and basically white doesn't want to give up the bishops. So, okay, white wants to take now on d7 and then double our pawns and so on. But we have a good reply here. We have king c8. And now we're getting out of the pins. Of course, the king on c8 looks a bit weird, but it's important that we're not pinned by the bishops anymore. And we have such moves as h6, a6 available to just hit the bishops. So white now takes bishop f6, knight f6, and is going knight g5. At least to get something out of it. I mean, white gave up the bishop for a knight. And if he doesn't go knight g5, we'll just have the bishop pair in an endgame. But now we cannot save this bishop because f7 is also hanging. So we just continue a6. We want to maybe expand on the queen side by going b5 later on. Bishop a4. And now we go h6, forcing white to exchange on e6. At some point, we want to clarify the position there. So like knight e6, pawn takes e6. And now we have these double pawns, which we try to avoid in some other lines. But here, it's not easy for white to attack these pawns. Like he can attack them once with bishop b3, but then our king will come to d7 and e7, so as not to be pinned. Defending e6, white cannot attack the e6 pawn further. And in the meantime, these pawns, they just control very important central squares like d4, d5, f4, f5. In this position, actually, on a longer term, we can also push the pawns like b5, g5 just to expand. Of course, my first priority here would be to bring the king to e7 just to connect the rooks, to have this pawn on e6 defended. And then I don't think black has any problem in this endgame. I don't see how white can push here, can make any progress. So this was bishop b5, and now let's see knight b5. White is going after our dark square bishop. There's not much we can do about it. We're going to play king e7 to defend the bishop. We're ready to give up the bishop. So now knight d6. Pawn takes d6. Okay, now the pawn structure changed, but again, the pawn on d6 is well defended. We have maybe a weakness on d5. On the other hand, white has no way to get there. There is no knight to jump to d5, and d5 square is well controlled by the bishop, by the knight. And in this position, okay, the pawn on e4 may be under attack in some lines. If we manage to get out of the pin, for example, we are threatening h6. If the bishop retreats, then g5 and e4 is hanging. So white has to do something about it. And bishop b5, playing active moves. Rook h d8. Okay, there is only one weakness on d6, but this is very easy to defend. For instance, now the king is defending it. But now black is bringing this rook into play as well. And this was the game Vallejo Pons Carlson played in Sao Paulo and Bilbao in 2012. Black went on to to win a nice game. Also, Vallejo defended well, and you can see this game in the model games chapter. Black has ideas here to go h6 or h6 g5 or a6 and push there, and white still needs to do something about the e4 pawn. Needs to defend the e4 pawn. Black is doing well here. So now let's see bishop e3. What is the idea of this move? White wants to go long castle and maybe h3, so as not to allow us to go knight g4. On the other hand, if we go bishop e6 at some point, he wants to have the g5 square free for the knight. And we go king e7. To me, this looks like the best place for the king, although it could get under some pin after bishop g5, but white just played bishop e3, so it doesn't work. So, because why is the king good here? The rooks will be connected once we manage to finish development. And also we're defending this bishop. If we play bishop e6, this bishop will be defended. So yeah, to me, this king looks great here. Long castle. And then we want to finish the development. And we can be a bit ambitious here, and we play bishop e6. Not to allow white to go bishop c4. And this looks great for black. We're also covering the d5 square. And now white goes knight g5, immediately attacking our bishop. Otherwise, we will just have time to, if not for knight g5, we have time maybe to go h6, to go knight d7, finishing the development with a very nice position for black. So white has to do something. But now, if we retreat the bishop, let's say here or somewhere, then white can play bishop c4 and takes over the initiative, attacking on f7 and so on. So we are countering. Now we're going knight g4. In turn, we are also attacking the bishop on e3. But now it's a forced sequence of moves. Knight takes e6. And there is no time to take on e6. For example, if we take with the f pawn, there is bishop g5 check, and then white can defend on f2. So we're not taking the bishop. That's why we're taking the bishop here, knight takes e3, attacking the rook on d1. And here the position is obviously very concrete. There are a lot of tactics. Let me just say it's good for black. And the best reply is rook takes d6. However, white can try, let's say, rook d3, which is met by f takes e6. Again, we get these double pawns, but they're, let me remind you again, we are controlling all these important squares, and the king is well defending the pawn on e6. So we're not really talking about the weakness there. Rook takes e3, bishop c5, and actually black is slightly better in, it was a game Quesada Perez against Plat Wojtek in Marianskie Lazne 2020. Besides this, there's an exchange sacrifice. There is knight g7. Knight takes d1. We take the exchange. Knight f5 check. Now we need to find a good square for the king because white has some... We don't want to allow white to gain extra tempo like bishop c4 if it comes with check, or knight d5 if it comes with check. So we just hide this king on f8. It is safe here. Knight takes d1 and knight c6. We can follow up with knight d4, knight d7 at least to to trade one pair of knights. And okay, white has compensation, but we have an exchange, so in time, black can also take over. Um, we could later on maybe activate the bishop to c5 and so on. That's why white goes rook d6 here. Like the knight was attacking the rook, now the rook goes away. And here, king takes d6, we don't want to spoil our pawn structure. Knight g5. White is saving the knight at the same time with a double threat knight takes f7 and to take our knight on e3. Here we need to show some accuracy, so f6 is the good move. We're not stopping knight f7, but we're saving the pawn on f7. And at the same time, we're attacking the knight on g5. Knight f7 check. Again, we need to be accurate. King e6 is the right square for the king, so as not to allow later on some knight d5 with check. White is taking the rook on h8. We also take the bishop on f1, the rook f1. And now the last important move in this long and forced line is to go knight a6. What happens is this knight on h8 has nowhere to go. g6 is safely covered. f6 is covered. White doesn't have knight d5 with check, which was an important feature. And okay, rook h8 is there. And with knight a6, we're defending in advance the pawn on c7, so that white cannot attack it with knight d5, knight b5. We will take on h8, and the endgame is just equal. If anything, the black king is doing great in the center. Let's go back. Now let's see bishop g5. So white doesn't play knight f3, bishop c4. This is an active move, pinning our knight, and white wants to go long castle immediately with check. We play knight bd7. Here we don't want to allow white to double our pawns with bishop f6. Long castle. And now we go c6. We are stopping white from playing either knight d5 or knight b5. So we are controlling these important squares. And at some point, maybe we can play king c7. Of course, we always need to be careful about this pawn on f7, so as to be able to defend the pawn on f7. And here there is knight f3 or f4. Knight f3 is the main move. f4 is this kind of move that is not justified, but it's aggressive, so we need to be careful about it. However, this move, white is changing the pawn structure. We have several solutions here. h6 is a good move, but bishop e7 is probably the most precise. Just developing the pieces. White goes knight f3. I just want to mention that if f takes e5, there is knight g4. So let me show you f takes e5, knight g4. And then knight f2 is a threat. Also, we want to trade these bishops, and if white takes on e7, king e7, and probably white has to take on e7. But that king e7, we get out of the pin. The pawn on e5 is going to fall. So this looks great for black. Knight f3, just reinforcing the threats. But we go knight g4 here anyway. We are defending the pawn on e5 like this, and we are threatening knight f2. And White will probably have to take on e7, and then again we take king e7, and the king will have a great position on e7. So this is not a good line for white. This f4 was not justified. Let's see knight f3. Simply developing, of course, the threat is knight e5, king e8. Again, we need to defend this pawn on f7. This is important. That's why we go king e8. And here bishop h4 or bishop c4. First of all, let's see bishop c4, which looks very natural. Actually, this is how white can develop the pieces in the most active or aggressive way. But it leads nowhere, because now the pawn on f7 is defended. And we can just go this move b5, expanding on the queen side, hitting the bishop with tempo. And now what can I do? I mean, taking on b5, let's say with bishop, doesn't really work. Black has enough resources to defend. So white has to go bishop b3. But here we can gain some more space on the queen side. Here, this is a good line to see that the knight on c3 is not is a bit misplaced, because b5 and d5 are well defended by us. Okay, now threat is a4. We just grab more space on the queen side, and black looks fine here. Black can even take over in the next moves. Although probably objectively the endgame is equal. Let's go back. Bishop h4, like prophylactic move, keeping options to go knight g5 at the right moment, maybe to hit the pawn on f7. Also defending the pawn on f2 in advance, and maybe at some point white can play bishop g3 to attack our pawn on e5, since we don't have bishop d6 anymore. All is good, but we can play bishop c5, simply completing the development. Targeting f2, although it's defended, it's still an active move. And let's say if we can play knight g4, the threat is going to be real. For now, we cannot do anything about the c8 bishop, so it will just stay there. But we can improve the position by pushing the pawns, for example, a5, b5, or even h6, and so on. And also there is this plan to go knight g4, attack on f2, and then maybe go f6 to shut off the white bishop on h4. I think black has a good endgame here. I like black's position. I mean, even the king is well placed. The only thing we need to be careful about this king is not to move the knight somewhere, let's say knight h5, and then some knight e5 happening. But otherwise, the king is doing great. And yeah, I like black's position. Let's go back. Let's see f4. White is trying to open up the game immediately. Here we go, knight b d7. It was also possible to go bishop b4, but knight b d7 looks good enough. Of course, white is continuing the development now. Knight f3, putting more pressure on e5, but we can just play bishop d6. We're defending with the pawn on e5, and we can follow up with king e7, c6, and so on. Also, of course, taking on f4 is already a threat, because white after bishop d6, white doesn't have e5 anymore. So I think this f4 is a bit hurried for white. Bishop c4. This is the main move, basically hitting the pawn on f7 and developing a piece. And now in the course we recommend king e8. I like this move. Black has other options as well. There is bishop b4, but then I mean, black tried to make this move bishop b4 work, but it's a forced line, and white can take the pawn on f7, black takes on e4, and so on. If you miss some detail in that line, you can just be worse. So king e8, I like it more. There is another option to go bishop e6, but this allows the white to double our pawns on e5 and e6, which is a long-term strategical disadvantage, and we'll prefer to avoid this. So king e8, the most flexible in my opinion. Also, the king had to go somewhere because in most of the lines white will go long castle, bringing a rook on d1 with check, but now it's not with check anymore. The king is already on e8. And here we covered many possibilities for white, like f3, bishop g5, f4 even, bishop e3, and of course the most natural move, knight to f3. Let's see them one by one. f3. White is defending this pawn on e4 in advance. And this is not an ambitious move, but probably white just want to shuffle the pieces. Maybe sometimes even improve the position of this knight on c3. Here we can go c6 because the position is not as sharp as before. So there is time to go for this move, restricting the knight on c3. At some point, also, maybe we can push b5. Otherwise, we have ideas, let's say knight d7, bishop c5. Here there's bishop e3 or a4. In case of a4, okay, white, what does white want to do with this? White just wants to grab some space. So go a5. We're not going to allow this. We go a5. Bishop e3. White has to go for this at some point. And now, okay, knight a6 is possible, but we're going to go knight d7. This looks more natural. And we can follow up with bishop c5. It's important to trade these bishops. So in these structures, to trade the dark square bishops. And then after we trade the bishops, we'll get some knight to c5. Then we can go king e7, bishop e6, and so on. The position is symmetrical, but the white knight is a bit misplaced on c3. Probably white should relocate this knight later on. Okay, the endgame is equal. Black has no problems. So bishop e3 straight away. Knight d7. The idea is the same. We want to trade the bishop with bishop c5. Knight e2, finishing the development. Bishop c5. And here white, okay, the knight on c3 was misplaced. That's why white goes knight d1. Maybe to bring the knight to e3, and then he could bring another knight to d3, something like this. But, okay, we're not impressed. We just go king e7. I think this is the best place for the king. Look at this, the king is in the center. we don't need to release the tension. I mean, if white takes on c5, it's fine. Knight c5, then bishop e6, and so on. Maybe b5 ideas. But otherwise, we still have some useful moves. Maybe a5, maybe again b5. So we're in no hurry to release the tension. The endgame is of course about equal, but black has chances to outplay white later on. Let's see bishop g5. These bishop moves are usually very active. White wants to double our pawns and also go long castle. Again, we defend against bishop f6. We don't want to have the pawns double. Knight b5. Um, okay, now the question is how can we stop this threat on c7? There is also a long castle here, but we can just go c6, so it's nothing special for white. Or if knight f3, we can go bishop d6, which transposes, or even bishop b4, if we want to take advantage of this move order. Bishop b4 is more active, and it works here. Knight b5, but then we have this bishop b4 check, and we're going to play bishop a5 to defend the pawn on c7. Meanwhile, the knight on b5 will be misplaced. c3, bishop a5. Yes, we're defending c7 successfully. f3, white also needs to take care of the pawn on e4. It was under attack. And here we can push the white knight back. White has to go knight s3. Then maybe knight c2, but it's wasting time with this, and white's strategy to go for this knight b5 failed. Black has a more preferable position already. Let's see f4. This makes sense, and this was suggested by Anish Giri in his course. White is immediately challenging the center, and he wants to follow up with knight f3 and so on. This line is sharper, and we need to be prepared here. It doesn't work on general principles anymore. But we have good solutions for black. First of all, bishop b4 with this annoying pin, and we want to, let me put this with red. Yes, we want to take on e4. And here we covered bishop d2, fe5, which is not so good, and bishop d3. So taking them one by one, bishop d2, simply addressing the pin, but it's quite a modest move. And here we can go bishop e6, challenging white's bishop. And we're not going to get a structure with double pawns because white played f4, so white will not be able to just attack our pawns. He will have to trade this f pawn. Bishop d3. Okay, here bishop d3 and bishop e6. But after bishop e6, f e6, black is totally fine. We can develop with knight c6. Again, we'll not be stuck with the two double pawns because of the pawn on f4. So white avoids this trade, bishop d3. And now the threat maybe is f5 because it comes with tempo on this bishop. But we have a good solution. We can take on f4. Notice that already here we have good development. Knight e2. Just finishing the development, maybe with the idea of bishop f4 afterwards. Knight b7. We developed the knight here because we want to keep an option to go c6. Of course, c6 is a good move in these positions if we manage, because we're stopping knight b5 or knight d5, so we are controlling these important squares. Bishop f4, and here c6 was played. Black had a comfortable position and went on to win in the game knight dh against Navarra, played in Shibenik 2009. Actually, let me show you a few more moves from this game just to get familiar with the position. So white played h3. It's good to control the g4 square. King e7. While the king will be good in the center, castle was not possible anymore. Short castle, check, king h2. And now black decided to offer this bishop trade. g3 and h5 was played. And black went on to win. Obviously, white's strategy failed here because black has good control over the e5 square. And now maybe there are ideas to go h4 and so on. Notice that black's king is doing great on e7. Let's see if takes e5. This is not so good, but okay. Yeah. We need to see what happens if white just takes the pawn. This can be seen in blitz games. Okay, e4 pawn was hanging, so we go for it. Knight e4. Knight e2. White is defending this knight on c3. And here there is a trap, so you need to be careful about it because white has this threat. Bishop f7, king takes, and then short castle. And then the knight on c3 is not pinned anymore. And white wants to take back on e4. So I need to avoid this. Once we know about this trick, or we spotted this trick, we're going to avoid it. And the good move here is bishop e6. White doesn't have bishop f7 anymore. And after we stop this idea, strategically black is already better. The pawn on e5 is a weakness. We can attack it later on with knight c6 or knight e7. And again, white's strategy failed here. Yeah, you can see this line in blitz games. White can try this trap with bishop f7. But now you know about it. Bishop d3 makes sense to defend the pawn on e4, and is the main line. Knight b d7. For now, we're defending on e5, but the knight is not going to stay here. The knight is going for further with knight c5. Again, attacking on e4. Here, okay, there is knight f3 or even take on e5. Knight f3 is the main move. Like taking on e5 doesn't make much sense. Knight e5. It actually makes it easy for us. Just take knight f3, and then we can simply reinforce this knight on e5. So why would white allow us this knight on e5, which looks so great? Obviously, position is fine for black. Knight f3. This is the idea. Actually, in most cases, white doesn't want to take on e5 immediately. Just wants to put pressure on this pawn on e5. Knight c5. We are threatening to take on e4. Also freeing up this bishop so that we can develop it at the right moment. And here there is castle and bishop d2. Bishop d2 addresses the pin, but again, it's a modest move. We just take on f4. Long castle. This was played by Jordan van Forest in some Blitz games. This looks like a playable line for Blitz games, but nothing more. Because black has several good ways to get a good position. Knight d3 is one of them, to just grab the bishop pair. Pawn takes. Now knight g4 deserves attention. One obvious threat is to go knight f2. Knight e3 could also be another idea. And black has the bishop pair and nothing to worry about. Okay, pawn on f4 is extra, but probably will not be able to keep it. Short castle is the main move here. White is defending against e4. And here bishop c3 is the good move, spoiling white's pawn structure. E takes f4 was another option, but I like bishop c3 more. B takes, and now knight f e4. We're taking the central pawn, but of course it's always a bit risky having the knight. I mean, it's all about the e file. However, we're going to be able to stop the threats. Also, we just gave up the bishop pair, and now we're opening the game, but everything is under control. We always have an eye on this bishop on this 3, so we can take it, and then white won't have the bishop pair anymore. Rook e1, this is the most logical move. Simply asking some questions down the e file. And here, okay, we have some forced moves, knight d3. We need to get rid of the bishop pair. cd3 is the move. We're going to see also rook e4 shot. Okay, rook e4, there is knight c1, and the endgame is equal. We have bishop versus knight. We will lose the knight on c1. And also, the structure on the queen side is bad for white. But white is a bit more active, and that's why the endgame is equal. So, c takes d3. And now again, the only move, knight d6. The position is quite sharp here, especially because our king is in the center, but we managed to reduce the pressure a bit by trading pieces. And it's important to have the knight here because it will cover our king. And here there is knight e5, a5. I mean, these are the most logical moves, which you're probably going to see in a game. Or there is also c4, some very clever move recommended by Anish Giri. So knight takes e5. This looks tempting, to threatening to give some check with the knight. And here, king d8 is the best reply, the most precise reply. And now we can play bishop e6 or f6 to attack this knight, and black is fine. For example, bishop a3, threatening to take on d6 and then on f7. But now we just defend f7, bishop e6. And we can follow up with rook e8 and then f6 with an equal position. There's also f takes e5. Again, a tempting move, bringing more pawns in the center, and it comes with tempo as well. Knight f5, the only move, but the knight is fine there. d4. White is pushing these pawns in the center, and of course, if white manages to go d5, our position would be very bad. But we just in time to play bishop e6, controlling all these important squares. And now, because they are opposite colored bishops, is not easy for white to make d5 happen. Actually, white is not able to do that. So white goes a4, trying to grab some space on the queen side. All this is good, but black is very solid here. So let's say rook d8 with a solid position for black. We have ideas such as, let's say, h6 to control g5 just in case. The king could switch to the queen side. So we're going to castle long, but move by move, artificially. King d7, king c8. We can play to defend the pawn on b7. And I don't see how white can make progress here. In the meantime, we have good control over the square c4 and d5. c4. This is a clever move, probably suggested by the computers. White is saying, I'm not going to show you how I'm going to take on e5. So I want to keep options. And I also have this idea to go bishop b2, then to have another option, maybe to take with the bishop on e5. If we didn't know about this move, we would be impressed. But since we know about it, we just go bishop e6 to cover the e file. And we keeping an eye on this pawn on c4 as well. Let's say white continues the plan, bishop b2. And here it's forced, we need to take on f4. But of course, that was the point of white's play. We're dropping the pawn on g7, rook to g8. Nevertheless, now this rook is going to be active. He's not attacking anything at the moment, but it's a rook on an open file with plenty of activity. Okay, now white has to take this pawn on f4. He can do it like bishop h6 or bishop e5. Let's say bishop e5 is the same thing. King d7, we need to get out of the e file. White takes the pawn. And Anish Giri ended his analysis in this position. We're going to continue it a little bit more. We're bringing this rook to e8. Just to mention, it was also possible to go rook 8 to d8. But to me, rook e8 looks more natural. We want to put the rook on the e file. We're bringing the last piece into play. We also make room for the king to c8 in case white goes knight e5. And we have useful moves like bishop f5 or f6. F6 is a useful move because it controls g5 and d5. This was played in PH by Detsky in Slovakia 2024. White went king f2 to bring the king in the center. And here it seems good to play f6 to control g5 and d5. I think black has a comfortable endgame here, nothing to worry about. So that was f4. And now let's see bishop e3. The idea of this move is to simply develop the bishop here, and white wants to castle long. But if white goes this way, we have this option to play more actively, bishop b4. We're creating some threats. e4 is under attack, or even bishop c3. White is defending the e4 pawn. And here we can spoil white's structure by taking on c3, bc3, and knight c6. Okay, white has the bishop pair, but we have the better. So the bishop pair, but we have the better pawn structure. And of course, in these situations, it's good to, since we gave up the dark square bishop, it's good to play b6, just to put some pawns on the dark squares to limit the activity of white's bishops. And then we want king e7, bishop e6 to exchange some pieces. It's a bit unbalanced position, but black is fine. And on the long term, if white doesn't do anything, the pawn structure will tell. Let's go back. Knight f3. This is the most natural move. It has two ideas. First of all, the obvious one to take on e5. And there is also an idea to go knight g5 to hit f7. So this comes with tempo and we have to be careful. And again, we're defending against both threats with this move bishop d6. e5 now is secured and f7 is secured as well because we can play rook f8 to defend it. Here we're going to see h3 and bishop g5. h3 is a good prophylactic move. White wants to go bishop e3. For example, he could have gone bishop e3 straight away, and then, but then we can go a6, and white still needs to go h3 later on. So it's all the same. Let's see h3, a6. So basically, these little moves like a6, h6. Okay, a6 is threatening b5. We are slowly improving our position, and since the center is blocked, we can. This pawn pushes b5, for example, is a strong move. At the same time, we're stopping white's activity with knight b5. Okay, white is stopping b5, a4, and now h6. Again, we're stopping bishop g5, we're stopping knight g5, so this is a good prophylactic move. And also, it's important to stop bishop g5 because we want to go knight c6. And the knight will be more active on c6 than if we go knight d7. Bishop e3. White is finishing the development. And he has to go long castle. And we can go knight c6 here. Notice that the knight here is suddenly more active. And maybe at some point we have options to go knight b4. Okay, long castle. And here we go bishop bishop e6. It's not so good to go king e7 because white can give this knight d5 check. If we take, then e d5 and this knight is hanging here. So that's why immediately bishop e6 is called for. We're not afraid of doubling the pawns because we'll be able to get king e7. White is going for it. And now it's time for white to shuffle the pieces a little bit. So knight d2, this is the most logical. The knight is heading to c4. Also, white will be able to play maybe f3 to defend d4. And of course, we go king e7, the best place for the king in this endgame. And our idea is to go rook b8 and then to push b5. We want to play this rook h b8 because if the a file opens up, then the rook on h8 will be great. The position is balanced. White can go f3. Let's say rook b8. knight c4, and here we go, b5. Of course, white doesn't want to take on b5 because he will just open our a8 rook, so knight d6, cd6. Now we can see these pawns, these central pawns are quite solid. They're not weak anymore. And they are controlling a bunch of important squares like f4, t4, f5, d5, and so on. We got our play on the queen side, and we also got rid of white's bishop pair. White still has this task square bishop, which is good because he has almost all the pawns on light squares, but position is quite blocked, and if anything, the position is going to open up only on the queen side. Black is fine here. Let's see bishop g5. The typical active move. White wants to take on f6 and to double the pawns. We don't want to have our pawns doubled, so that's why you go knight b7. And long castle. Okay, we're going to see briefly also short castle. But if short castle, we can just go c6 and restrict this knight on c3. So we can do this because the d6 bishop is not under attack, and then we can go king e7 and so on. So long castle makes more sense, it's more ambitious. And now again, um, we cannot move these pieces. So we just, the center is blocked, and so we're just creating threats like now with a6, we want to go b5 and gain space on the queen side. We also have useful moves like h6 to with similar ideas on the king side. So white needs to stop b5. a4 is a good move, I think. And here it's useful to include h6. If white goes bishop e3, then there is knight g4, so bishop e3 is out of question. White goes bishop h4 instead. And here we don't want to hurry up with g5 because the pawn on g5 could be a weakness. If we can do without g5 for now, it's better. And we have this rare move here, knight h5. The knight gives options to jump to f4, attacking the pawn on g2. Also, we have this idea to go f6 and completely shut off out of the play this bishop on h4. So this is interesting and good move. Here we have a5 and knight d5. Basically, a5 is a useful move for white because it prevents b5, and white wants to go bishop a2, knight d2, knight c4, something like this. But this takes quite a long time. We can go rook b8, renewing the threat of b5. We want to have the rook on b8 for that. Bishop a2, white just follows up with the plan of knight d2, knight c4. And here it's good to restrict this dark square bishop with f6. I like this idea very much. At the same time, we're strengthening our center, the pawn on e5. Also, another important idea is that if we go b5 takes a b6, knight b6, without f6, white could have taken on e5, but now there is no such thing. Everything is defended. White goes knight d2, continuing the idea of knight c4. And here comes the last accurate move. We need to remember this b5. We need to start our counterplay. We're stopping c4. No, we're stopping knight c4. White takes, and then we can take with the knight. And it's important that the c4 squares are under control, so white cannot uh, play knight c4. We have a slightly worse pawn structure indeed, but this bishop on h4 is shut off, and we have idea to go knight f4. So black has a active play here. And looking at it, I like black's position. Okay, let's go back. So here, knight d5. This is typical. Whenever black goes knight h5, white is putting this knight in the center. It looks great, but the knight on d5 is, although very active, is not threatening anything. And here we go rook b8 to prepare b5. The only way to stop this is to go a5. And then we go f6. Again, I'm a big fan of this move to shut off the white bishop, to reinforce the pawn on e5 and so on. And we want to go b5 or knight f4. We're not in a hurry to, or we don't want to play g5 because we would weaken our position. So let's see a sample line here, bishop g3. And here we can go b5. What takes, we take with the knight. And then we're going to trade this knight from d5. So knight b6, rook b6. The endgame is about equal. Again, we have a slightly worse structure. This is typical for the line, pawn on a6 and c7, but the white's dark square bishop is shut off on g3. Probably at some point we're going to take it, and we'll have the bishop pair, and also we have active pieces here. So the endgame is fine for black. White didn't manage to get anything here. This is far from white's idea to squeeze black little by little in a slightly better endgame. So here we have the bishop pair. So we will have the bishop pair, and black is doing well. Okay, so this is the Philidor endgame. We saw that in some lines. Uh, Most of the lines there are like improving the position of the pieces, um, but overall black doesn't have many problems. Bishop c4 is the main move here, king e8, and for example f4 completely changes the character of the position. The position opens up. We need to be careful, and but after bishop b4 and the lines we just saw, black is doing great. Otherwise, in the main line with knight f3, bishop d6, bishop g5, this line we just saw, mm, there is no way for white to open up the position. And after this preparing moves like a6, h6, black is doing fine. So, okay, maybe the logical question would be, will my opponents go for this endgame? Yes, you can face this endgame in practice, but um, and you need to be a bit precise. You need to be careful not to let's say think, okay, now the queens are off. I'm out of white cannot do anything. No, you still have to be careful, but I think on the long term, um, after black manages to develop the pieces, the end game is really fine for black. And you can see also in the modern games that black can take over. There are some examples there where black convincingly won the end game. So it's just one or two inaccuracies for white, and the position can change immediately. Well, I wish you good luck in this end game, and I hope you'll be able to put in practice the ideas I've just explained to you. Thank you for watching.